Hello everybody and welcome to my review of C-Smash VRS for PlayStation VR 2. TLDR, it's a good and fun time, but only for a little while. It does the one thing very well, but there's not much else after that. The online play could have extended my playtime, but I never found anyone to play with. Spending $30 might be a tad bit too expensive for a game that's essentially a sci-fi version of Wii Tennis that you can beat in an hour. It's a good game and very fun to play, but just be aware of the amount of content you're getting into. It's recommended, but in small doses. I suggest you wait for a discount sale if you can. And now, here's my full review. I've been finding it increasingly funny how the best VR games I've played are usually old Dreamcast games. Res Infinite is a shining example, while Space Channel 5 and the upcoming Samba de Amigo being other examples that spring to mind. Now we have another Dreamcast game in the form of C-Smash VRS, a reimagining of Cosmic Smash from 2001 that never actually came over to the West. It is actually a Japan exclusive game. So of course, as you would guess, I had never played that game before, but I didn't want to look up any gameplay footage beforehand. It's very easy for people to get caught up in nostalgia and let that carry most of their opinions when reviewing a newer version of a classic. Or that usually opens itself up for excuses to be like, well, it's an old game, what did you expect? I, for one, didn't even know that the game existed until I found out about the VR version. I played the demo prior to the full release, but that's about it in terms of context or previous knowledge. I'm going into this relatively blind, so I hope that brings along a fresh perspective for people that don't know if they should buy this or not. With that said, my overall opinion of C-Smash VRS is that it's a very good game. It's super simple and doesn't offer a lot of content, but it succeeds in doing what it set out to accomplish, which is to adapt the classic Dreamcast game into VR. Playing it with PlayStation VR 2 was also enjoyable, with controls that feel good accompanied by great audio visuals that carry a large part of the experience. The aesthetic is as Dreamcast as it gets, and I love it. However, that atmosphere slowly starts to fade as it gives way to some shortcomings that might stop you from investing the full $30 asking price, such as a lack of content and an online experience that's seemingly dead on arrival, locking you out of essentially half the content that this game had to offer. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the positives. C-Smash VRS looks and feels great. It has that unique and simple low-poly look that's emblematic of the bygone Dreamcast era, where most games of the time had this simple but colorful and expressive look to them. With our modern technology and achievements in video game graphics, I would love to see more games with this level of personality return someday, because it is sorely missed. These visuals become more enjoyable as you go through the single-player campaign, where the levels start to change color and change form as you progress. There are windows that you can look out of, showing astronauts cheering you on, or giving you a thumbs up, or playing around in different rooms. For such a minimalistic game, there's a decent amount of personality infused into it. I was even more surprised to find out that a lot of this stuff was never in the original, so it's cool to see all of this get added in. Of course, this is a PlayStation VR 2 game, so it's worth mentioning things like the haptic feedback and headset vibration. It feels good to get that kind of feedback when rallying the ball, and the headset sometimes vibrates very subtly when changing levels. Another thing that contributes to how good it feels to play is the sound. The audio is solid throughout. Hitting the ball gives this great punchy sound that sounds much louder in the video footage than it actually does in your ears when playing. I don't know why that is, but hey. The game also has a cool soundtrack that picks up the pace as you confront more challenging levels that feature obstacles, moving targets, and power-ups that change the flow of play. All of these elements combine into a fun experience that I honestly found difficult to put down. I was consistently failing the initial levels of the game as I was slowly learning how to play. But you very quickly start to get a groove going where you'll be rallying the ball back and forth for a long time, and in a really satisfying way that includes using your power-ups more intelligently. There's definitely a flow state to be found here that truly makes this game worth playing. If you want to work out, this'll do it. And of course, there is the initial hesitation that you'll get into, right? This is a VR game where you're waving your arms around and not a lot of people have space to be able to move around like that. So there was a fear of me knocking stuff over while I was playing, but I did make sure to have plenty of space to move around freely, and so I had a really great time. C Smash offers a short but replayable single-player campaign, where you can pick different paths that decide which levels to play through, with a challenging final boss at the end of it all. Even with all the time I had to retry certain levels, I beat the entire thing in just a little over an hour, which might be disappointing for some. There are higher difficulty modes and alternate paths you can take, but it still won't be too different from your first playthrough. It's at this point in playing where I started to see the pitfalls that this game falls into. I don't like saying them because of how much fun I had at first, but these are important points that will heavily impact whether you want to purchase this game or not. First off, if the only thing you're interested in is single-player content, then you're kinda screwed because there's not much more to do beyond the short campaign with only 2 difficulty modes that I mentioned. The only way that you could expand to other game modes is through online play, which gave me no matches at all for any of the modes that I wanted to play. Because there was no one else online, I didn't have access to any of these modes whatsoever, which I personally found ridiculous. At the very least, the game should allow you to play against bots of varying difficulties in order to account for a lack of players. It obviously doesn't compare to playing against real people, but I at least get to experience what those other gameplay modes look like, instead of locking them away because the online experience was non-existent. Ironically, I found people to play with during my time with the demo, and that was really fun. I just think it's a shame that the full release didn't have the same turnout, which was apparently 0. Right before I started recording the voiceover for this review, I decided to boot up the game one last time and give the online another chance, especially when I found out that you can open yourself up to be found on all of the game modes all at once. After trying it out, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that I finally got a match. I was able to play against somebody in a few game modes, and it was super fun and different from the campaign. The bad news, however, is that this one person was the only match that I ever got. After that guy left, I ended up waiting in the warming up room forever, but no matches ever came. I went back into the menu, I got back in, I restarted it from scratch, I went into the warm-up room again, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and sadly, we're back to the same problem that we had before. The best that I could do was to get one singular person to play with. But anyway, let's move on from that. If there are any other criticisms that I can levy at the game, it's in regards to the movement. Moving your body left and right with the analog sticks might cause a little bit of motion sickness, and the vignette that's used to protect you from this is set way too high as a default. You can adjust it in the options, but still, it might be annoying for some that might have trouble seeing because of it. Speaking of the analog stick, the stick that I needed to use for moving was on my left hand, which is the same one that I use for swinging. Because I'm left-handed, it was really cumbersome to try and do both at once. The button for crouching was also on my left, so I'd find myself in intense situations where I'm really focused on hitting the ball, and I accidentally crouch when I didn't mean to, or I move my body when I didn't want to, or I hit the goddamn home button again by accident. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, swinging around the controller made me accidentally press the home button many times, interrupting my game, which was frustrating every single time. It's like when you accidentally pause during a fighting game, it just makes you feel like an idiot. This is not necessarily the game's fault, obviously, but it's more of a realization that the build of the PlayStation VR 2 controller is not necessarily well suited for games like this, since you will definitely be pressing buttons by mistake, with the home button being the easiest one to push down. Fortunately, you can go to the settings menu and change the controls, so that all of the movement is on my right hand, so I commend the game for thinking of that. Even then, it can still get a bit annoying, since the crouch button is still in the same hand as the movement stick, so trying to quickly move your thumb from one thing to the other can be a little awkward. One last thing is that the walking speed is too slow to catch up with the ball when it goes fast, so you'll end up in a situation where the ball's too far away, and you'll just give up and lose the ball because you know there's no point. Maybe that was intentional in order to avoid motion sickness, but I feel like a lot of those missed shots could have been saved if I just moved my own body instead of letting the analog sticks take me there. There is an alternative by going to the settings and changing this into teleportation mode, which does a great job at avoiding motion sickness. I found this to be a significantly more comfortable way to play. But of course, there's another problem. When you teleport, you don't get a lot of freedom in where you're going to land. It's like you're stuck in tracks, and when you move, it simply moves you into these tracks. The ball obviously doesn't factor this in and just bounces around wherever it wants, so when you try to teleport, you always end up either way too far to the right or way too far to the left. And because teleporting isn't smooth, you just hard cut to the side, so it can be really disorienting to grab your bearings as the ball is flying towards you. Also, I got this really strange bug with teleportation, where I got blasted to the other side of the level and I couldn't do anything. It was really weird and I had no way of fixing it other than to quit the level entirely. The teleportation is definitely comfortable, but it creates problems when the gameplay is faster paced, and it's kinda buggy. I ended up going back to free movement, but I decided to not hard push the stick to one side or the other. Instead, I tried to very gently tilt the stick to the sides, so that I can smoothly set up my shots without getting dizzy with harsh sudden movements. Overall, I enjoyed my time with C Smash VRS, but I also think that it could be so much more than what it currently is. As fun as it feels to hit the ball around, it also felt like an expanded version of a minigame that could fit inside a much larger product, and then getting charged $30 to play it. Aside from some small bumps with the movement, there's nothing inherently wrong with this game. It looks and feels great, and it's super satisfying to get good at it. However, there's simply not enough of it for the price that it's asking for, especially when there's no one playing online right now. There absolutely needs to be some sort of update that allows you to play those multiplayer modes with bots, because it's unacceptable that you simply can't play those modes at all if there aren't other people online, or maybe you don't have an internet connection. So yeah, I mean, I liked the game, but I highly recommend that you wait for a sale, and also play it in small doses, because it's a very solid and enjoyable experience, but also it will end about as quickly as it starts. And now, I'm going to sit and wait for the next Dreamcast game to be re-released in VR. My vote is on maybe Shenmue VR. Oh, and Crazy Taxi VR, that would be awesome. Or maybe Super Monkey Ball, I don't know.